The city was quiet, so quiet that its inhabitants seemed to be part of a silent, frozen picture. The gloomy streets, winding around the old houses, were hidden under a carpet of thick fog, as if the city itself was trying to hide from prying eyes. No one came here, just like that there was no need. It was forgotten and hidden by time, except for those who once lived here. There were few of them, but they all did not want to talk about the past. When Alina received an offer to buy a house, she first thought it was a joke. An estate in such a remote place, and at such a low price, seemed too good an offer to be true. But looking at the photographs of the old mansion, Alina felt something strange. The house seemed to attract her, calling her to itself. Intuition told her that she needed to go and look at this house. Something inside her decided that this was her home, her place. The journey to the city took longer than she expected. The roads were getting worse. The trees thickened, hanging over the narrow paths, as if guarding the entrance to a world that had long forgotten the rest. She drove through forests, valleys, past abandoned farms, until finally she found herself on the main street of this town. At first glance, it looked empty, abandoned. But looking closer, she noticed movement in the windows. Someone was watching her. An old woman with a wrinkled face stood on the threshold of her house, silently watching Alina's every step. The house turned out to be even more majestic than she expected. High windows, like huge eyes, peered into her, walls overgrown with ivy, as if hiding some secrets. She found the keys in the mailbox, as she was promised, and plucking up her courage, pushed the heavy door. The creaking of old hinges echoed through the empty hall. The inside of the house was old-fashioned, but somehow alive. The walls were decorated with old paintings that exuded the coldness of time. The furniture, covered in a thin layer of dust, still retained traces of the past, as if someone had recently sat in these chairs, read books, drank tea. But what attracted her most were the mirrors. They were everywhere in the corridors, rooms, even on the stairwells. Huge, massive frames seemed to hide something more than just reflections. Alina decided to spend the first night in one of the bedrooms on the second floor. She was tired from the long journey, but the feeling of anxiety did not leave her. The bed was strangely cold, despite the warm blanket. A slight rustle behind the door made her wary, but she attributed it to the old house and its dilapidation. It's just the wind, she tried to convince herself. It's just a house that has been missing its owners for a long time. But a strange sound woke her up at night. A light knock, as if someone was barely touching a wooden door with their nails. She froze, listening. The sound was so quiet that it could easily be confused with the noise of the wind, but something in its rhythm did not give her peace. Slowly getting out of bed, Alina went to the door and opened it. The corridor was empty, but when she looked back, her gaze fell on the mirror opposite. There was something strange about it. The reflection seemed a little unnatural, as if the corner of the room looked different than in reality. She stepped closer, but the sound disappeared again. The next day, Alina decided to explore the house in more detail. She wandered along the long corridors, looking into the rooms, each of which was like a separate world, frozen in time. But most of all, she was worried about the mirrors. Every time she passed one of them, she felt someone looking at her, as if someone was standing behind her, but when she turned around, she saw no one. The longer she stayed in the house, the more it seemed that the mirrors had a life of their own. In the evening, when she was sitting in the living room, a strong wind suddenly rose outside the window, as if nature had decided to remind her of its existence. She closed the shutters so that the wind would not break the glass, but the noise did not subside. At some point, it seemed to her that someone said her name, barely audible, like a whisper. This is impossible, she thought. There is no one else here. But the whisper was repeated. This time she clearly heard it, coming from one of the mirrors. Slowly, as if in a dream, she approached it, and in the reflection she saw not herself, but the figure of a woman standing in the distance. She looked like a shadow, a silhouette, but she was so clear that Alina could not look away. The figure was approaching. Its face remained indistinguishable, hidden by the darkness, but Alina felt its presence. It was not just fear. It was the certainty that this figure was not something illusory, but quite real. The woman stopped, almost touching the mirror surface, and whispered, "Open the door." But what door? Alina looked around, but there was no door in the room except the one through which she entered. Suddenly her gaze fell on a small key that was lying on the table. Her fingers trembled when she took it. She had no idea what this key was for, but something inside her pushed her to use it. Running her hand over the mirror, she felt a cold, smooth surface, but suddenly there was a knock under her fingers, as if the mirror was not there a mirror, but a door. The next few days were excruciating. Alina no longer felt safe in this house. The figures in the mirrors appeared more and more often. She tried not to look at them, but her gaze kept returning to these strange reflections. Each mirror had its own inhabitant, its own shadow, and they all seemed to be calling her. She turned to the villagers, but no one wanted to talk to her about the house. Only one old man, his eyes clouded with memories, approached her at the market and whispered, "This house belongs to them. They have always been here. You did not choose them, they chose you." Returning home after this strange meeting, Alina felt that the house was becoming more and more alien to her. The mirrors now seemed like portals to another world, a world where reality and fantasy merged. One night, when she was trying to sleep, she heard a scraping sound. She knew it was not the wind. It was the sound that came from the mirror in her room. In desperation, she took the key she had found and went back to the mirror where she had first seen the woman. She ran the key across its surface, and suddenly the mirror began to move, retreating back like a hidden door. A corridor opened up before her, leading into darkness. A cold wind hit her face, and she felt something ancient and dangerous. But a voice inside her called to enter. She took a step forward,